Hello, 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 my friends. It's Catherine here. I actually don't know what time it is because I can't see the clock on my phone. So if anybody wants to let me know, I just want to know sort of when people are going to be expecting me to start. I'm so happy to be here with you. It's a beautiful evening here in Connecticut. It's going on 8 o'clock, so I don't have too much more sunlight, but this is one of my favorite places to... Hey Linda, can you tell me when it's 7:45? This is one of my favorite places to stop along my walk and record. It's actually a complex near me that has this beautiful gazebo and pool, and you can hear maybe the stream behind me. And hey ladies, can one of you let me know, just put in the time in the comments so I kind of know where I am. Hey everybody, thanks for popping on. So I was inspired. I'll just start doing a little background as people come on here. I'm sort of at the end of a, oh, it's 7:46. Perfect. Thank you, Linda. So I'm going to jump in. So I'm obviously taking my walk here in the evening. I try to do this every evening after I finish a long day of clients, to clear my mind and just, stretch my body a little bit, because I'm mostly sitting in front of Zoom all day. And a lot of the conversations that I have been having this week with people have been just about how wonky they're feeling this last week in particular. And of course, let's face it, we're in a pretty wonky period of time, right? Between the COVID and all of the protests and deaths and everything that's being brought up literally from the shadow that is shaking us all. And so it makes perfect sense that we're all feeling a little bit wonky. But I wanted to add a few other things to your understanding, and invite you to have a lot of compassion for yourself and for those around you in these days. There are just very powerful energies, very powerful cosmic, planetary alignments, and I want to, by way of a disclaimer, say that I am not an expert in this. Cosmology, astrology, astronomy, numerology, sacred geometry are not my areas of expertise. As I like to say, I know just enough to maybe not be dangerous, but help me understand what's going on in the bigger picture, right? In the higher realms that I think most people are not thinking about or not aware of in their day-to-day lives. And I know for me, having been on a pretty intentional journey for 25 or more years now, that understanding things in the way that I have come to understand them has provided a container for me, sort of a safe container where I can be in the world, but not of the world. I can be aware of everything that's happening, everything that's going on in people's lives, my clients' lives, my kids' lives, and see what's happening, in our world, and have compassion and understanding and empathy for all of that. And at the same time, not get too caught up in it, because I can thankfully see and understand this from a slightly higher perspective. So I wanted to share that with you tonight. I've shared it before in my Facebook group, and I wanted to sort of jump onto my personal page because I can reach more of you this way. And so if you haven't heard me in my Facebook group, I hope you'll have an opportunity, even if you're not on here live, maybe to jump on later and listen. So without too much more of an introduction, let me just sort of get right to the meat of it, if you will. So of course we know we have been managing with this COVID situation that comes with its share of loss and grief and anxiety, depression, isolation, uncertainty, anticipatory grief, collective grief, right? So that we've sort of been dealing with, settling into, trying to create our lives with some sense of structure, with a little bit better idea these days than we had, this time in March, certainly, of what's going on. Certainly not what to expect, because we don't know what to expect. There are so many questions yet, so many things we don't know, and that's sort of part of this anticipatory grief. So there's that whole layer of things going on, loss of job, loss of income, loss of structure, loss of routine, loss of personal connection. But the other thing that it has made very, very clear, and this is what I really want you to hear, and you may have heard this from other people too, is that it is really shining a light on the fact that we really are one, right? There is no one who is immune to this particular virus, to this illness that is impacting everyone across the world. And so if nothing else has sort of opened your eyes to the fact of unity consciousness, of the fact that we're all one, perhaps this very challenging situation can be, the bright light for that can be the recognition that we really are one. And then in the midst of that understanding, we find ourselves with all, the unrest, with the murders and deaths, with the protests, with everything that's happening around Black Lives Matter. And probably for the first time, for white Americans in particular to begin to look and see with a new set of eyes the systemic and institutional racism that people of color, especially Black Americans, have been experiencing in this country for 400 years. It strikes me as very interesting that this is all happening while we're sort of sheltering at home, because if people were at work, we would probably have not had as many people protesting. But it's almost as though the being at home gave more people the opportunity to practice their rights of speech and the ability to protest and to give voice to their concerns. And so we have that layer going on, and just like the COVID, all of this going on around this racism in the United States we don't know how that's all going to roll out, right? It's a very uncertain time. But again, the beautiful bright light in that is that the light has finally been shined light enough, long enough. Sadly, it had to be, at the death of particular George Floyd, but other African Americans, to finally get us to stand up and say, wait a minute, this is just not right. So the bright light is that we are now recognizing that there has been this very deep, dark energy in the soul of America that has to be brought to the surface to be revealed so that it can be healed. And so I want to put that in context, sort of again, astrologically. So in January, there was a particular planetary alignment, and I forget exactly what it was, but the bringing together of these two planets was a time where division and divisiveness was going to start to be highlighted, right? So here we are, clearly with division and divisiveness being highlighted. Then we moved into a period of an eclipse corridor, if you will. So in early June, we had a lunar eclipse on a full moon, And eclipses are always about changing things up, right? Again, anytime there's an astrological event, we're changing things up, we're shifting things around, we're pulling things out of the dark into the light. And in this particular case, we had an eclipse on June 6th, I believe it was. And then we had the solstice on June 20th. The solstice, again, being a very pivotal time. It's the time where we have the most light shining onto the planet at any time during the year if we're in the northern hemisphere. Of course, it's the opposite in the southern hemisphere. But again, this idea of this infusion of light that is shining so brightly that it's pushing everything that's been in the dark, in the shadows, up to the surface. Right on the heels of the solstice, we had another eclipse the following day. And this was a new moon eclipse. Again, bringing more change, more disruption, and along with the solstice and this eclipse, it happened in 0-degree Cancer. Now again, I am not an astrologer. These are all things that I read and I'm fascinated with and I put together in my mind and sort of like, oh my goodness, no wonder we're going through all of this change, right? And this change has been predicted. Again, I mentioned that, I've been on this sort of conscious spiritual path for more than 25 years now, and certainly I have been reading these things about this ascension process, about this shift into the age of Aquarius, about creating, anchoring heaven on earth. How else has this been identified? Going from 3D, the three-dimensional world, into 5D. There's a lot of different ways that this time has been predicted. And I used to say, I used to think, how can that happen? How can we just all of a sudden one day wake up and be at a point in our planetary evolution where everything that every system that has been put in place, every institution, every structure will start to collapse so that something new and lighter and more equitable and more creative, more unified can come about. And ladies and gents, I believe that that's where we are right now. I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is the time, not the apocalypse, not that we're all going to die, not that the earth is going to explode, not that some of us are going to, leave the planet in some rapture, but that we are moving in through this belt, this photon belt in the universe, where more and more light is shining on us individually, collectively, and on the earth herself, to bring everything that's been in the shadows up to the surface. Everything that has been built on greed and power over and inequality and subjugation and denial of rights and you name it, right? Getting ahead without any concern about how other people are impacted by that. And that has been a very out of balance expression of the masculine energy. Not all men, I'm not saying that all men did this, but the masculine energy of pushing forward and power over has been out of balance for 2,000 years. Yeshua and Magdalene laid the seeds for this time in history when they walked the land and literally allowed their energy infused the land so that 2,000 years later we find ourselves in this place. So I've talked about COVID, I've talked about the deaths, the protests, where we are in terms of the planetary alignment. So far, 2 eclipses in addition to the summer solstice. There will be another eclipse in 2 weeks. So we've had 3. We'll have 3 sort of in this pattern of eclipses here. And in addition to all of that, we have what I named this Facebook Live after. We have 6 planets in retrograde right now. Now, I don't know whether you all pay attention to that. we hear that, oh my God, Mercury's in retrograde, right? And because Mercury, the energy of Mercury sort of influences travel and legal things and technology, we know, if we pay attention to it at all, that when Mercury is in retrograde, it's not necessarily a great time to fly or make travel plans. It's not necessarily a great time to sign contracts. And technology can go wonky, and lots of people have been experiencing that this past week. I've been on so many things where Zoom has just gone out or calls have been dropped. It's just been kind of crazy. But in this case, not only is Mercury in retrograde, but 5 other planets are also in retrograde. So what does that mean? Well, retro, you can just the name of it sort of gives you an idea. So retro means sort of going back, right? So when a planet is in retrograde, it means that from where we are on Earth, as we view that planet on its orbit, it appears to be going backwards, right? Because of distance and time and, all of that stuff. They're not actually going backwards, but that's the appearance. And the energy of that tends to slow things down. So, like I said, things can go wonky, it can be a very difficult time, but it's also a very significant time if you take the opportunity to use the retrograde, just like many of us have used COVID as sort of life has slowed down. Mine hasn't slowed down that much, but I hear other people's have. So if we use the energy, the idea of retro, going back, we have this opportunity to go in to ourselves, to be to reevaluate, to revisit, to re-acknowledge, to recommit, to, give me some more re-words. I usually have them all in my head, but I just kind of went blank. But you get the idea. It's really a time to revisit where we are in our lives at any particular time, reevaluate what's working in this area of my life, what's not, design how we want to move forward, right? So that when the retrograde is complete, we have sort of a new energy to move forward in our lives. So retrograde can be a difficult time. It can feel very wonky. If you have been feeling tired, if you've been out of sorts, if your thoughts have been confused, if you've had trouble sleeping, this has happened to me, and which is unusual. I'm usually a great sleeper. If you're finding yourself irritable or annoyed or impatient or getting into little, almost picking fights with your partner or, people in your life, just know that so many areas of life are being affected by these retrogrades right now, and the alignment of the planets. Just know that the alignments are such that it is all about stirring up. It's about injustice. It's about equality. It's about respect. It's about responsibility and self-responsibility. There's so much of that energy right now, very active and alive on the planet. And when we look around, it's no surprise, right? I mean, it feels in perfect alignment with what we're experiencing in the outer world. The universal principle, as the inner, so the outer. And so everything is a mirror reflection. We are individually taking time to review and reevaluate and hopefully reemerge differently. And all of our systems and all of our structures are going through a similar process. So I know this has been a really hard time. I know that everybody's challenge and struggle with this has been different. If you are really struggling, I send you my love. I send you my energy, my healing. If you need support, reach out. But I hope that understanding what's going on in a higher capacity, right? If you can lift your spiritual eyes away from the evidence that we're seeing in the world, that everything is terrible, and lift your eyes to a higher perspective to recognize that this is perhaps the most important moment in the evolution of humanity in the last 2,000 years. And as we move into this age of Aquarius, into this golden age, it's been promised that it is a 2,000-year period of peace and awakening and enlightenment and moving more and more into our higher consciousness, into our 5D crystalline Christ-like selves, out of our heavy three-dimensional selves, getting more connected with, and believe this if it resonates, if it sounds like whatever, just let it go. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything, but it's my belief that when we were created from the star beings, the 12 nations, that each contributed their DNA, that we were created by Source with 12 strands of DNA, and those strands of DNA have been dumbed down, have been turned off, right? The hose was stepped on, the spigot's turned off, right? The clamp was put on, and we've only had access to 2 strands of DNA. So do the math, 1/6. We are only 1/6, and of who we really came here to be. And the more we do our healing work, the more we lighten up, the more we connect with those higher dimensions of ourselves, all of those other things that become available to us when all of our DNA is turned on, tuned in, turned up. So you may have noticed, even within these last couple of weeks, that maybe your intuition is getting a little better. You're getting little impulses about things. You're thinking about somebody and then all of a sudden they reach out to you. Or every time you look up, the clock is at 2:22 or 4:44 or 5:55, right? All of those things are confirmation that your process of awakening has begun. Phew. Well, can you tell I get passionate about these things? Kind of went on a little rant there. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it provides some perspective. I hope it provides some comfort. I hope it provides some understanding of where we are. And yes, we're in a crisis, but with crisis always comes opportunity and possibility. And that is also about what this coming eclipse will be about. More opportunity, more possibility. So hang in there, my dears. Be kind to yourselves. Take time to rest. Get out in nature, preferably a beautiful spot like this. Be kind to your loved ones. Know everyone is experiencing this in their own way. And be well. I love you, and I will see you again soon. Bye now.